Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Marianthi Timogliani and I am a customer support engineer of the Beta CA systems. Today, I will present the latest developments in Answers version 25.1.0. As many of you know, Answers is a web platform that acts as a front end, combining and presenting information and key metrics coming from various sources and managing CAE and test data. In today's presentation, I will walk you through the new features of Answers and then demonstrate its functionality with a live demo. Alright, let's dive into the new updates in Answers version 25.1.0. There are some general new enhancements related to the data sources, new panels types and improvements to existing ones, as well as new features regarding the connections. Let's start with the general new features. We have introduced a new modern user-friendly interface designed to make, navigation easier and more intuitive. The header area has been optimized, gaining some much needed vertical space to be used for the Daslet items. All the options of a Daslet have been collected together and are displayed as separate tabs. And these include data sources and panels, a dedicated section where you can configure and manage your data inputs and visualizations, synchronization, a tab for advanced options to set up multiple synchronization plans, and coloring. This section is a new one and provides flexible options to assign custom colors to all panel objects. A key enhancement in this release is coloring. It is now possible to assign custom colors. Users can easily change colors by directly clicking on them in the list panel where they're displayed. It is applied throughout the Daslets, including charts, media, legends, and so on. This is most suitable for cases of Daslets which have been set up in such a way so that all entities get their color by the simulation run, simulation model, or Azam safety test they belong to. As a reminder here, this is achieved by setting from attribute in the various coloring options of the panel's properties. For more advanced options to manage color assignments, the Coloring tab can be accessed by pressing the Edit Data Sources and Panels button, and in this tab, users can edit the assigned colors and fix a specific color for an item, ensuring consistency for any future usage of the Dazzlet. Pinned colors appear at the top of the list. A new feature with great importance is to share a Dazzlet easily, especially with people from other departments or suppliers. Currently, sharing can take place either with all Answers users or with only some users privately. The user is faced with two options when sharing a Dazzlet. They can allow recipients to view data from fixed BetaQL queries. So this option is based on having some fixed BetaQL queries to restrict to which data recipient will be able to view. So if the database is updated, new iterations are inserted, recipients will be able to see them too. The second option is that the user, when sharing, can allow display of only current data. This option restricts access only to the data displayed in the Dazzlet at the time of sharing, so new entries will not be allowed. Furthermore, the shared Dazzlet is not editable. Sharing is achieved without the need for recipients to have actually the connections to access this data, but as mentioned previously, at the same time, no further access to data is permitted. A dedicated tab is offered to view the datasets that have been shared. Another new improvement is the ability to choose from multiple worker machines when launching ANSA or Meta for the Beta Web Panel. This new feature allows tasks to be distributed across several machines, optimizing workflow efficiency and resource management. The entire process is orchestrated through SPDRM, which simplifies and streamlines the execution. Decisions on where to launch tasks are based on the amount of free RAM. Additionally, for security reasons, authorization is now required for the answers and PAL communication. Please note that due to this, after updating to version 25.1.0 of answers, older PALs need to be updated too, with the PAL included in the answers package. Now, moving on to data sources, I would like to highlight the key changes in this area. We now have the option to open and retrieve data directly from an XLSX file in a file system. Prerequisite is that Answer server can access this file system. Data are queried dynamically, meaning that if there is a change in the XLSX file, the change will be directly reflected to the retrieved data next time they are queried. So, data can be ported live from file system or can be uploaded and stored at the answer server as static data of the user. Data are collected from a specific seed, whereas it is possible to define the cell range or collect data of all the available columns and rows. Furthermore, the feature supports multiple level headers, which simplifies working with more complex datasets. Let me introduce the new transformer pivot in the field of data sources. This transformer creates separate objects for each attribute of the original objects by pivoting tabular data from columns to rows. The source must be either a feeder or another transformer, and it must consist of a list of objects. There is a menu that helps you define how the transformation takes place. It can be done with one of the two options. The fixed attributes option. This option lets you define which attributes will stay constant while everything else is pivoted. And attributes to pivot option, here you define which attributes will be pivoted into rows. All other attributes will remain fixed. Now, what happens after pivoting? For every attribute you pivot, a new object is created. This object includes all the fixed attributes you defined earlier, with two additional attributes, the attribute name, which holds the name of the pivoted attribute, and the attribute value, which stores the value of that pivoted attribute. Let's turn our focus to panels and take a look at the new features and the improvements we have made here. One of the most major enhancements in this version comes for the performance of 3D model panel where the model is rendered on the client machine. It is now even possible to work with large models containing 5 to 10 million elements, something not possible before. Just keep in mind that the initial pass will take much longer because the data are being transferred to the machine there. Subsequent passes are much faster, making it comfortable to view animations and rotate models of significant size. In the meantime, a 60% reduction in memory usage was achieved, which means you can now work more efficiently with larger datasets without overloading your system. Furthermore, it is now possible to select and send multiple HTML 3D model reports to the same panel in order to compare the 3D models. In this case, it is also possible to color by model using the coloring options as in curves, images, and so on, providing a clearer and more intuitive way to differentiate between models visually. A new type of chart called histogram chart has been introduced. This chart shows the distribution of the values of a specific attribute as bars. So, how histogram chart works? Imagine that we have a DOE analysis with 9 different variations. And we would like to show how many experiments fall within a specific range of a design variable, for example, the break thickness. We will start by setting the attribute to be displayed along the x-axis, so the design variable like the break thickness. Then need to select the bins either by their total number or by their width, depending on how precise you want the distribution to be. And next, select what the y-axis should display. We have two options here. The count option, which displays the number of entities, the experiments in each bin range. For example, it shows how many experiments fall within a specific range of the design variable, and the aggregation option. With this option, bars represent an aggregated value like the sum or average for the entities in each bin range. In the same chart, there is also an option to convert the values to percentages. Another powerful visualization type introduced in this release, which is the radar chart. This chart is designed to present variables in a two-dimensional format, which help us to compare performance metrics across different categories for different vehicle variants. The data source should be a list of objects with a category and performance metric value as their attributes. And for example, as shown here in the panel, we can see how different models like crash scenarios or NVH metrics are viewed on a radar chart. Each axis represents a specific category or variable such as frontal impact or driver noise level. The chart not only allows you to visualize multiple categories at the same time, but it also supports color coding based on an attribute value, helping you distinguish between different models or configurations at a glance. So in this example, the colors correspond to specific vehicle variants. Moving further, a new panel named HTML panel is introduced. The panel does not require any data source as an input. Actually, the HTML panel allows you to freely add information in a flexible format, and this means you can include details like text and links to other Dashlets alongside your Dashlet content. Now, let's move on to the lifecycle graph that offers a clear and hierarchical view of an object's history and its relationships. For example, I have selected one subsystem to view it in a lifecycle graph, and therefore it presents the hierarchical structure that maps the progression of an object through its life cycle, showing, for example, how versions or iterations are linked. This feature gives a better overview of the object's progress, helping users easily identify statuses such as completed, in progress, or error states for each iteration. As a note here, in case of SPDRM connection, an additional DM microservice is required, and this microservice is defined in the settings of the SPDRM data provider and is currently only needed for this case. Moving forward, in the scatter chart panel, new aggregation options are now available that can show the sum, the maximum, the average and standard deviation of large datasets. Performance is also significantly improved to be able and handle such large datasets. And the option to apply color based on an attribute value adds a visual layer of differentiation. For instance, you can use colors to highlight specific categories or status, making the chart easier to interpret. With this new development, you can now set or unset synchronization directly from homepage, making it faster and easier to link or unlink related data. For more advanced options, there is a dedicated synchronization tab. Here, you can configure a custom range, which allows you to define the specific time or value range for synchronization, or to have multiple synchronizations, enabling you to manage several synchronized views simultaneously. Continuing with the panel properties, it is now possible to download items from panels such as lists, tables, curves, and media. In case of lists and tables, data are downloaded in CSV format. In the table panel properties, several new formatting options are offered. For example, sorting the data rows in such a way that a table with key values shows them always in a specific order. Customize the text style for better readability, such as value formatting, alignment, and date options. New aggregators are also possible, such as sum, average, and standard deviation. It is now possible to show in the legend the minimum, maximum, or average for each curve. To do this, you need to apply the double curly brackets in the legend area and select the operator you would like to show in the chart. It is also applicable in the range currently displayed in the chart when you zoom in a specific area. Coming to the connections now. Authentication for file-based DM connections is now handled in the backend, simplifying access for Answers users. The administrator runs the DM microservice with the flag skip authorization. Then, under the admin settings, the embedded authentication option should be selected, and then on the connections page, the refresh button is disabled in such cases as users no longer need to log in to the DM microservice from the front end. This concludes the presentation. Thank you for your attention. Now let's move on to the live demonstration to show you some of these features in action. Let's bring answers to life. This is the answers page. And in the Dasslets tab, you can find all the Dasslets that are available right now. Let's start with a feature that changes the way we work with Dasslets, and that means there is no longer true that only one Dasslet needs to be active at a time. You can now open multiple Dasslets in separate browser tabs, and how it works. If you choose to open in a new tab, it opens in a new browser tab and becomes this Dasslet independent. If I go back, I can select more Dasslets to open in a new tab, and more. And this this is very useful because you can now compare Daslets side by side, or imagine that you can work on one while keeping another open for reference. And the active means that each tab has its own active Daslet, so changes or updates will not interfere with other tabs. Let me close those. As I mentioned earlier, we are focused on improving usability. So we have reorganized under the home page the header to save some screen space on the upper left corner. And by introducing different tabs, we aim to enhance the user experience, make it easier to navigate and access key features such as the data sources and panels tab, where the user can set up the Daslets, the synchronization tab, and the coloring. Concerning coloring now, this is a new feature as well. Users can edit and assign different colors to several visualization panel types in the Dazzlet, such as curves, bars, scatter charts, and so on, based on the selected simulation runs. And I will explain. Let's activate another Dazzlet. By selecting these two simulation runs, the Dazzlet is set up in such a way that all the reports, key values, curves, images, videos, 3D models are loaded and are displayed in a predefined layout. And for example, if I would like to modify the color of the second simulation run, I would just click on it, select the color, and so simple as that, this change is reflected to all my reports. However, the first thing is to define the color settings under the properties panel for each visualization type. For example, if we edit the pulse velocity and go under properties in the coloring section, you will notice that the correct attribute is defined here, and this attribute belongs to the selected simulation run. So if we go back to the coloring tab, here in this advanced tab, it is possible to edit the assigned colors or fix a specific color for an item for any future usage of the Dazzlet. And if I would like to pin one of them, you may notice that the pin colors appeared at the top of the list. And if, for example, I would like to modify the color of the first simulation run, so simple as that, the color has been changed. So this tab is accessed by pressing the Edit Data Sources and Panels button, and it's used for more options to manage the color assignment of your Dazzlet. And let's go back. Let me explain some additional features here. A new option is available that you can download items such as lists, tables, curves, images, and so on. And that means from the context menu of each panel, there is an option to download items. If you are working with a table or a list, you can download those items in CSV format and you can export those data for offline analysis or share them with others who do not have access to the Dazzlet itself. Let's go back to answers again. Any panel from now on can be viewed in full screen mode. So if I select the full screen mode, you will notice that it can give you a clear overview of detailed data with the interaction that curve charts have. If I edit, for example, this table and go under properties, you will notice that I can select, for example, to apply the attribute value as a sort value. So I can sort. So I will sort the rows by the attribute value, and I can select the sorting direction to be ascending or descending. And the concept is that you will be able to get a table with key values, shows them always in a maximum order or in a minimum order. And this attribute could be the value, so we get the key values ordered by maximum. Or you can use an index so that you explicitly specify with this which would be first, second, and so on. And this index could be assigned to a single key value name, an index CSV file, using static data when the key values are stored in the automated post-processing step. Apart from this, if I edit now the simulation runs list and go under properties in column style section, I can modify the date format in here, and you will notice that some additional date formats are available, that they can display only the date. And in general, we are planning to give the option to the users to apply its own date format in the future. So let's go back. Another feature that we introduced in version 25.1.0 is that you can show the maximum, the minimum, and the average in the legend of the plot together with the curve name. And I will explain. Let me make it bigger. I will edit the properties. I will go under the legend section. You'll notice that in the legends field, the user can define, for example, the maximum of the y-axis. So the maximum values will be displayed in the legend for the different simulation runs. And of course, the same equivalent ones for x-axis can be used as well. And apart from this, the range of the y-axis can be applied, and these values will be updated as we zoom in or zoom out of the curve. We are planning to implement something slightly different in the future to be able to change the information shown when you move the cursor in a plot, and instead of closure point values to show curves, maximum, minimum, and so on. Another improvement on this release from now on is that you can quick set up some panels to be synchronized together. And I will show you right now what I mean. We select, for example, the graph and the video, and they are synchronized together. Plus that. As a note here, this refers only to panels applicable for synchronization, such as media and graphs. For more advanced options, There is a dedicated synchronization tab, as I mentioned in the presentation. And if I go to this tab, here you can configure a custom range, the specific time or value range for synchronization, or even if apply multiple synchronization plans. For example, I will select the graph and the video. I will save it as we did in the previous version. Let's move on to 3D models, an area we have made major improvements regarding the HTML 3D. And if I scroll down a bit in here, I will just select the two 3D models from the list and be aware that the first pass, so if I press the animation, the first pass will take considerably more time as the data is loaded into the client's machine. However, subsequent passes you will notice that are significantly quicker. As you notice right now, you can check how responsive it is when rotating the model. But not only that, for example, if apply some actions, let's say I would like to keep the floor visible, just check how responsive it is as well. Let's bring all the parts again. In this release, apart from managing multiple models, you can assign colors to the 3D models. So let's deselect the results, and if I navigate in the upper right corner in the settings and press the color by model option, the models will be colored based on the colors that we have applied on the list panel. You can handle the visibility from the models list. Prerequisite is that under the properties of the panel, you need to define the appropriate attribute. So as simple as that, the multiple models can be colored and assign any color for them. Imagine now that we could share this dashlet with another Answers user. If I scroll up a bit and press this button to share the dashlet, here we have some options, as I mentioned in the presentation. The policy for BetaQL queries could be done in two ways. The first way is to allow only dynamic BetaQL queries, and that means that the user allows the BetaQL queries to fetch the data currently existing in the database. So if the database is updated, the dashlet will show eventually other data. And the other option, I will select this, is to allow only currently displayed data. It means that it restricts access only to the data displayed in the data at the time of sharing, even if the feeders used in the dashlet should result to another set of data in the future because of changes in the database. Regarding visibility, we have the option to share it with all users, and this will become available to all Answers users in the Shared Datasets tab, and privately with link. So I will select this, and the dashlet will be accessible only through this link, and the sender will be able to see the Dashlet and manage it in the Shared Dashlets by Me section. So let's navigate to the Shared Dashlets page. You will notice that we have two tabs. Shared Dashlets tab, which are all the Dashlets that have been shared among the Answers users when we selected the first visibility option, and the Shared by Me tab. Notice that the Dashlet I just shared, it is displayed to this list. So I'm going to copy that link. And I will share this data with another user. I have created a demo user for this purpose. So please notice that this user, the demo user, has no available Dashlets, no available connections, and just I will paste the link. So you will notice that this user can still see and fetch the results I just have shared. So I selected two simulation runs, and you can also see that the Dashlet fills the whole page with data from these selected simulation runs. And you can share for sure the 3D models with others, because Dashlet sharing works for 3D models as well. So you can share it with your team or suppliers, even if they do not have access to this dataset or to this specific connection. And of course, the Dashlet, as you may notice, is not editable at the moment. We do not have the option to edit the data source and panels. However, looking ahead, we plan to bring more functionality to Dashlet sharing, like data shared with groups of users, better management and editing of shared Dashlets. And in the future, we will also provide the capability to share Dashlets to non-Answers users. Let's go back to my user and I will change the subject. I will open this Dashlet. And regarding the data sources now, you can dynamically retrieve data directly from XLSX files that are stored on the Answers server. So requirement on this is that Answers server can access this file system. Changes of the Excel file are automatically reflected in the Dashlet. Data are collected from a specific sheet, and it is possible to define which data and how to import them by defining the sheet name, the cell range, and the rows to be used as the headers. And if I go back to the data source and panels, a new connection has been created here, the file DM connection, that a new method has also been created and parses the XLSX file and returns it as a JSON. So simple as that. Moving on to panels, we have added 4 visualization panel types. So let me open another Dashlet. Regarding radar chart, this chart is intended to display variables in two-dimensional format. So by selecting two simulation runs and then filtering the intrusions, let's say keep only the engines one, you will notice that this chart can be used to display intrusion levels across multiple simulation runs. Let me show another example. By selecting these simulation models as shown in the panel here, this chart can be used, for example, to visualize metrics like NVH. And if we would like to compare these metrics for different variants, a split attribute under the properties needs to be defined. And apart from this, coloring is also supported based on a specific attribute. Another visualization panel type is the HTML panel, where free text can be inserted. Data source is not required, and currently basic text and paragraph formatting are possible here. However, the importance of this new panel is that provides links to other datasets. Let's go back. As you may notice in this scatter bubble chart, we have added a background image. The improvement here is that for scatter bubble charts and curves charts, a background image can be applied. If I edit this panel and go under properties, you will notice that you should place a specific image path on the background section. And this image actually should be placed in a specific directory within the installation folders, and you need to be sure that it has the appropriate read and write permissions. This feature is really useful on this specific example, as we can display safety ratings based on some specific regulations, on that example the Euro NCAP regulation, and it visually categorizes safety performance across various aspects according to these Euro NCAP standards. And based on these rating levels from good to poor, the colored dots represent the rating for each specific test within these categories, and they are aligned with the color-coded levels. Let's move to another example. Let me open another example, the disk break. In this dataset, we have a DOE analysis with 9 different variations. DOE often explore how different factors, different design variables impact some performance metrics. While scatter plots and bar plots shows relations between variables, histograms specifically focus on the frequency of tested range. For example, here we have two design variables, the break thickness and disk height. Let me make it bigger. You might notice that the most experiments are clustered around a specific break thickness range, which could bias results or indicate a critical region for further exploration. Each bar now represents the number of experiments of these different variations within a specific break thickness range. X-axis represents the range of break thickness values. Following this, if I edit this panel and go under Properties, you can configure the intervals by choosing either the bin width or the number of bins, for example, depending on the accuracy you would like to achieve for this distribution. Then the y-axis should be defined, and by selecting the type count, this option displays the experiment in its bin range. For example, it shows how many experiments fall within a specific range of the specific design variable. Let's open another example. Regarding life cycle graph, I have collected in a list all my subsystems, and if I select to view this specific subsystem in a life cycle graph, as you may know from the other beta products, you can track all the objects, the subsystems, the simulation models, all runs through their life cycle. And that means that provides a hierarchical view of an object's history and relationships, and you can identify statuses like error or warning or work in progress and so on. As a note here, DM microservices for both file-based and SPDRM connections must be run within specific flags that allow the use of either self-signed certificates generated by answers or official certificates from certified authorities. Let's open another dashlet, the material database. Open in a new tab. In this dashlet, we have access to a comprehensive repository of material properties and characteristics. We managed to generate scattered bubble charts showing maximum average stresses according to strain rates and temperatures. And we came across these datasets where the data provided was initially in a format that answers could not read in a way that we could take advantage of them and show them in these scatter charts. But we found an easy way to transform the data with a pivot transformer and view them in answers without making the user apply changes on the raw data on these CSV files. So, using this predefined layout, you can calculate several statistical values for each experiment and view the results. Here we have collected a list with all the materials, so each row represents a material with some fixed values, and we can display the stresses over time for those experiments. And we can calculate several statistical values for each experiment. In the table panel, new aggregation options are now available that can show maximum, average, standard deviation of these large datasets. So how the pivot transformer works. As you can see, here is the CSV file, the raw data that came with this form. So we have all the time intervals in this column, and under them we have the stresses. So we needed a pivot transformer that can create separate objects for each attribute of the original data by pivoting columns into rows. And this is particularly helpful when handling those large data sets, as it allows us to view these experiments for different materials in scatter charts without requiring changes to the raw data. So if we go back to answers and edit the data sources and panels, and for example, edit this data source, These are the original data format, and after pivoting by defining some fixed attributes, for example, the density, temperature, material, strain rates, and so on, all the other attributes will be pivoted, and we will end up with a format like this. So the time intervals are transformed from columns into rows under a new column called attribute name, and the corresponding stresses are stored in a column called attribute value. Performance is also significantly improved to be able to handle such large and larger data sets. And imagine that after applying the pivot transformer, the dataset size can grow significantly, sometimes reaching millions of rows. So we have worked to optimize performance that even these large datasets can be handled efficiently. And we plan to further improve the speed and responsiveness when working with such large datasets. Let's move on to the last enhancement. We have added the integrated authorization for file-based DM connections. The first step is for the administrator to run the microservice with the following flag: skip authorization. Then, if we go back to answers and navigate to the admin settings and edit the data provider for the file-based DM, the second step is to enable the checkbox of the embedded authentication. On the connections page now, the refresh button is disabled in such cases as users no longer need to log in to the DM microservice from the front end. I believe that's everything for our new features and enhancements. Thank you all for your time and attention today. I would love to hear your thoughts or answer any questions you might have. Have a nice day.